On this Thursday night, tit for tat, how Canada's premiers don't yet agree about how to fight Donald Trump's tariff threat.
We're sending a message to the U.S.
As Alberta reveals its plan to beef up border security. A young woman says she's gone from living in fear in Iraq to living in fear in Canada.
Did he tell you that he wanted, like, sexual favors? That's what he was expecting?
Yeah. What she says she endured in the search for a better life. Balance of power. The new hydroelectric deal ending a decades-old battle between two provinces. And the sky-high mystery creating a huge buzz.
Why are we putting up with this?
We have no idea who's doing it.
Who's flying giant drones over New Jersey?
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Carolyn Jarvis.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Canada's plan to avoid Donald Trump's tariff threat seems to be taking shape, but not everyone is on the same page. Following a briefing from the federal government, a number of Canada's premiers have chosen to take things into their own hands. For some, that means investing millions at the border to try to appease the incoming U.S. president's concerns. Others say they're ready to fight back, promising retaliation and setting the stage for a trade war, which could have serious impacts on both sides of the border. David Akin begins our coverage tonight.
Doug Ford says he's ready to hit the off switch at Ontario Hydro.
Well, first of all, it's a last resort.
More than 1.5 million Americans rely on electricity from Ontario to power their homes, but Ontario's premier is ready to turn off their lights if Donald Trump makes good on his tariff threat.
We're sending a message to the U.S. You come and attack Ontario, you attack livelihoods of people of Ontario and Canadians. We're going to use every tool in our toolbox to defend Ontarians and Canadians across the border.
Ford got Trump's attention.
That's okay if he does that, that's fine, but the United States is subsidizing Canada. It's truly a subsidy, and we shouldn't have to do that.
This trade lawyer can see Ford's strategy.
It's a major escalation, for sure, of the rhetoric. It's very clear that Doug Ford is playing the meet force with force card.
Other premiers are less aggressive. Quebec's François Legault says he will not block electricity exports, and Alberta's Danielle Smith will keep the oil flowing south.
Under no circumstances will Alberta agree to cut off oil and gas exports.
Same with Newfoundland and Labrador.
We have no interest in stopping the flow of oil and gas.
And Smith thinks Trump's tariffs and any retaliatory tariffs should be avoided.
So instead, we're taking a diplomatic approach.
But the premiers of Manitoba and BC say retaliation may be necessary.
For our part here in Manitoba, we're making a list, we're checking it twice, and we'll be ready for January 20th.
If we're forced into a corner, for British Columbians, nothing is off the table, and we will respond.
And all of these different approaches by premiers also make it difficult for Canadian companies to prepare for what may be coming.
It's very hard to prepare, but when the rubber hits the road and the tariffs do get imposed, if that's the case, there will be a lot of pain.
Now, the premiers will be in Toronto for 2 days of meetings next week. And Carolyn, finding a common approach will be right at the top of the agenda.
David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. As Alberta's premier embarks on that diplomatic approach, she unveiled plans to boost security at the Canada-U.S. border. Danielle Smith's government will spend $29 million on a new provincial patrol unit. It will include drones and dogs and will monitor the province's southern border with Montana. Heather Yorks-West looks at the new measures and whether they will have an impact.
Far from the busiest port of entry between Canada and the U.S., the Sweetgrass Coots border crossing between Alberta and Montana sees about 20,000 commercial vehicles each month. Illegal drugs have been seized here too, like this shipment of cocaine worth $3 million intercepted by the RCMP.
Today, Alberta's government is taking immediate action to crack down on illegal activities at our shared Alberta-U.S. border, namely illegal migrants and the trafficking of drugs and guns.
Alberta's $29 million plan to beef up border protection includes a new patrol team under the command of Alberta sheriffs, with 51 officers, 4 drug patrol dogs, and 10 cold weather drones.
The zone will be at least 2 kilometers deep and will be designated as essential infrastructure.
Sheriffs there, the province says, will be able to arrest people thought to be attempting illegal crossings or trafficking without a warrant.
this has been a consistent issue that people in Congress have been sounding an alarm bell on. We know that illegal border crossings across the Canada-U.S. border increased from just over 2,000 in 2022 to over 23,000 in 2024.
Still, the Alberta-Montana border sees relatively few illegal migrant crossings compared to other places in Canada, and a fraction of what's seen at the Mexican border. Calgary's police chief believes the greater security concern could soon be people heading north.
With incoming President Trump and immigration policies, if he begins to round up individuals who are illegally in the country, we could easily see a mass movement of people out of the U.S. Toward the north.
Alberta is not the first province to announce plans to deploy its own resources to the border. Quebec did that last month before the U.S. president even made his tariff threats. Now, for the federal government's part, those details are said to be announced in the coming days. Carolyn?
Heather Yorks-West in Calgary, thank you. The U.S. president-elect rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange today as he was recognized by Time magazine as its Person of the Year for a second time. He was previously named after winning the presidential election in 2016. Times editor-in-chief Sam Jacobs said this year's decision was not a difficult one, as we are living in what he called the age of Trump, following a political comeback of historic proportions. Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador have struck a tentative new deal to end a long-running dispute over the Churchill Falls hydroelectric plant. The agreement rips up a lopsided contract that was signed in 1969. That deal saw Hydro-Quebec get the right to buy power at a fixed price, resulting in most of the profit. Under the new deal, Hydro-Quebec will pay nearly 30 times more for electricity. Heidi Petracek reports on why both provinces see this as a win-win.
It's being touted as historic and mutually beneficial. A new deal to sell hydroelectricity from Churchill Falls in Newfoundland and Labrador to Quebec next door.
Premier Legault did show us the money.
And get more electricity, and we all need more energy.
Pitched by both premiers as a path forward, righting a past wrong.
This is the 1969 contract, and we are endeavoring to rip it out.
That original agreement, inked more than 50 years ago, was heralded as a big deal back then, but over time left a bitter taste in the mouths of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. That's because it sold power to Hydro-Quebec at a permanently fixed price of 0.2 cents per kilowatt hour. That electricity brought in $28 billion in profit for Quebec in 2019, and just $2 billion for Newfoundland and Labrador. In the new deal, Hydro-Quebec would pay roughly 6 cents per kilowatt hour and invest more than $30 billion to expand Churchill Falls and build 2 new power plants. Newfoundland and Labrador would rake in $200 billion. Legault says the price would save his province $200 billion in power costs and provide stable electricity for the next 50 years.
$200 billion for Andrew, $200 billion for me. It's fair.
Churchill Falls is on Innu land. This new deal designed to include the Indigenous community in future benefits.
They acknowledge that this is our land. And this is our river, and that's good.
We will have a generational impact on the growth and the prosperity of Newfoundland and Labrador.
For Fury, it's a feather in his cap, succeeding where almost every other premier of the province has failed. The deal's final details to be ironed out, he said, in short order, in time for both provinces' next provincial elections. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is introducing new legislation targeting homeless encampments. If passed, the law will give municipalities and police forces more power to move people out of public spaces. It would also mean heavy fines or jail time for anyone who repeatedly uses illegal drugs in public.
These encampments are taking over public spaces, with illegal drug use happening out in the open, creating huge safety risks for people and communities. Enough is enough. This has to stop, and it will stop.
Ontario has seen a dramatic rise in homelessness during Ford's time as Premier. There were 1,400 encampments across the province last year, according to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. Today, Ford also announced $75.5 million for homelessness prevention programs. A multi-billion-dollar class action lawsuit against 3 of the biggest tobacco companies cleared a major hurdle today. Representatives of Canada's provinces and territories and smokers harmed by tobacco voted to accept a $32.5 billion settlement. The provinces and territories will get most of the money, while $6.5 billion will go to smokers and their heirs. JTI McDonald, Rothmans, Benson & Hedges and Imperial Tobacco Canada sought creditor protection in 2019 after a Quebec court found the companies knew of the links between cigarettes and cancer but failed to warn customers. The settlement still needs the court's approval early next year. U.S. President Joe Biden is commuting the sentences of about 1,500 people and pardoning 39 nonviolent offenders in the largest single-day act of clemency in modern history. The reduced sentences are for people placed on house arrest for at least a year during the pandemic. Biden says they've demonstrated remorse and rehabilitation. Earlier this month, Biden issued a controversial pardon to his son Hunter, who was being prosecuted for gun and tax crimes. President Biden is also reportedly weighing whether to issue preemptive pardons to those who investigated Trump's effort to overturn the 2020 election and could face retribution when Trump returns to the White House. Calmer winds and rising humidity in Southern California are helping crews battle a fire that's driven thousands of people from their Malibu homes. They're now making progress on the fire's perimeter in steep and rugged terrain. An emergency supply station has also been set up for people in need of food, water, and first aid. The Franklin fire is holding steady at 1,600 hectares, but is only 7% contained. Syria's next chapter after the Assad regime's collapse. Coming up, how the U.S. could influence what happens to the war-torn country.
I crossed the mountains between Lebanon and Syria.
That's American Travis Timmerman alive in Syria. The 29-year-old from Missouri has been missing since June. He was found walking barefoot down a strait in Damascus after rebel forces took control. Timmerman says he was on a pilgrimage and was detained by Syrian border guards and put in jail. Since 2011, it's estimated more than 100,000 Syrians arrested by the Assad regime have disappeared into prisons never to be seen again. Now, after the fall of Bashar al-Assad, families are desperate to find their loved ones. Many of Assad's victims endured torture. Thousands were executed. There's hope, but no assurance that competing militant forces inside Syria will do anything differently. As Redmond Shannon reports, international players are vying to influence Syria's future.
Sunrise at Mount Kassioun, a view of Damascus that was off limits since the civil war began in 2011. Being here is an indescribable feeling, says this man. Down in the capital, there is also joy about the toppling of the Assad regime by the Islamist HTS militants. It is still regarded as a terror group by Washington, at least for now.
Also critical to unlocking international recognition, international support that Syria very much needs.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East to vouch for U.S. interests, just weeks before Donald Trump takes power. On Saturday, the U.S. president-elect said, "This is not our fight. Let it play out." Although in 2019 he said this about why U.S. troops are still in Syria.
We left troops behind only for the oil.
I think there is an effort to get a number of tracks moving that essentially cannot be reversed. That's not a US-led or US unilateral track, it is multilateral.
Officially, the US says its troops are supporting Kurds fighting a resurgent Islamic State.
We want to avoid sparking any kinds of additional conflicts inside of Syria.
This Kurdish commander says his forces are being redeployed to fight HTS. They also face the threat of Turkish-backed militias. The fall of Assad has really only removed one player from this multifaceted war. Damascus may be at peace, but the fight for Syria goes on. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
She came to Canada in search of safety. Now, a Yazidi woman says she's been victimized by an organization meant to support her. A Global News investigation next. The Yazidi genocide of 2014 saw thousands flee ISIS in northern Iraq and many settle in Canada. One of those families thought a new home in Winnipeg would offer peace. But after a well-known Yazidi leader there was charged with sexually assaulting their daughter, her family says they feel as unsafe here as they did in Iraq. The young refugee sat down with Melissa Ridgen to share her fear and frustration with Canada's justice system.
The barbarism of the so-called Islamic State is something survivors of its violence will never forget.
ICC like this come to Iraq and take like women and people, they're taken away. They kill them. They're trying to like rob them.
Ethnic Yazidis were among those ISIS targeted and punished the most during the militant group's offensive in northern Iraq in 2014, killing men and boys, enslaving women and girls.
We ran to like Kurdistan, and after that, like 2017, we come to Canada, like to see like a safe place and to stay here and see like Yazidi family and people around us.
This 19-year-old was a child when her family fled, ultimately settling in Winnipeg, home to a small but supportive Yazidi community.
They help us to find like a house and a school and everything.
Global News is concealing her identity.
I'm going to talk about what the Yazidis have been going through, and specifically the people and the women and girls who arrived in Canada, and in terms of trauma.
Haji Hesso is the head of Manitoba's Yazidi Association. His group is a non-profit that purports to help Yazidis build new lives in the province, but Hesso is charged with allegedly trying to force himself on the 19-year-old this summer.
I didn't let him to touch me like he trying to touch me on my body.
Did he tell you that he wanted like sexual favors? That's what he was expecting?
Yeah.
In October, Hesso was released on bail conditions not to contact her, but was arrested again 2 weeks later for allegedly breaching that order. By November, Hesso was out again. 3 days after his release, the young woman alleges she spotted him while out for a walk.
His voice comes to my ear. It's like, we will kill you one day. And I saw him on my eyes, like he was driving. He looked at me.
She says 2 men were in the vehicle. She says she can't be sure who said it.
This time, Hesso was charged with breaching bail and uttering threats. The woman tells Global News that Manitoba's Victim Services did little to prepare her for how this case would unfold and did not inform her that Hesso would be released to await trial. She says she now lives in fear, accused of making up allegations, and she alleges she's been threatened by Hesso's supporters in the community, including one man who came to her home.
He said like, oh, like someone give it to you the money. That's why like you did this all problems. And I said, no one's give to me any money or anything. He said, okay, if anything happened to the Haji or like anything like that, we will kill you, and you are the reason for this thing.
Lori Wilkinson has done extensive work for the federal government on Yazidi resettlement.
In their case, because they came so quickly without, a lot of time to kind of digest this psychologically, you can be victimized by people who take advantage of that. And it happens in the Yazidi community, and it happens in other communities too.
Hesso's lawyer didn't reply to Global News' request for comment, but denies all allegations against his client.
Within the Yazidi community, are there people who are still supporting you and your family?
Yes, most of them supporting me, and they are like behind my back and helping me and trying to like getting me stronger more than the other days.
Seeking to again find strength and security here in her second home. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
What's flying over New Jersey? The unexplained drones and the FBI investigation next. A mystery is deepening in the sky above the eastern U.S. Witnesses have reported seeing drones, some reportedly the size of cars. So who sent them? As Jackson Proskow explains, the FBI is now investigating.
They're just pacing back and forth, going very slow.
Look, up there in the sky. It's not a bird or a plane.
That is a drone in the airspace.
For nearly a month, residents of New Jersey have identified flying objects after dark, and there are a lot of them.
One would go over, and then the next one would come, and then the next one.
Wave after wave of drones keep zipping overhead.
I look to my left and I see two big drones. They were propeller driven, going very slowly.
Some are the size of a car.
The minute you get eyes on them, they go dark.
No one seems to know where they're coming from or what they're doing. But some have been spotted near potentially sensitive military sites.
The rumors have gone from Russian spies to people stalking Trump to aliens.
Could it be a foreign government or a secret Pentagon program?
These are not U.S. military drones. These are not drones or activities coming from a foreign entity or adversary.
Helpless to stop the aerial onslaught, local officials are calling for drastic measures.
Those drones should have been blown out of the sky. Why are we putting up with this?
The FBI believes the truth is out there and is looking into it. And no, these are not the agents on the case.
Just keep watching. It's unbelievable.
What is going on in New Jersey?
We're investigating, but I don't have an answer of who's responsible for that.
Like early UFO sightings, which often turned out to be mistaken observations, there's hope for a simple explanation behind the drones.
It's 2024. Are you telling me in this day and age somebody can fly drones of this size, the size of a car if not bigger, and we have no idea who's doing it?
For now, what's up in New Jersey remains a mystery.
It's like right above the trees.
One that has the entire state buzzing. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Thursday night. I'm Carolyn Jarvis. Tonight's Your Canada is Summer McIntosh, who's doubling up on her world records this week. She won gold in the women's 200-meter butterfly at the World Short Course Championships in Hungary today, just 2 days after setting the world record in the women's 400-meter freestyle. Thanks for watching. Neethu Garcha will be at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.